about what is the survey and what is the scale. As most of you people, they are already into the research, and research is already, a very important part of the research. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So a very important part of the research is how to conduct a survey, right? So here it is. I'm concerned about the quantitative survey, or let's talk about scales, or let's talk about the questionnaire design in this session of 1 hour. So you can always stop me in between, and you can always ask the question wherever it is required. Survey, but generally, suppose we want to solve a particular problem, and we want to, let's say problem is, if in case related with the, let's say, customer satisfaction with respect to airlines, or it is related to something, some sort of, research in e-learning or online shopping, where we go for the quantitative type of research. So here, the survey plays a very important role, right? So we always confuse survey and questionnaire, but questionnaire is just a part of your survey. So a survey, it is often the best way to get the information and feedback used in planning and program improvement. See, this is very important part. Once the theoretical and conceptual framework is clear, then we go for, designing the questionnaire. We try to make our questionnaire in sync with the objectives which we have, or in sync with the objectives of the, your study. So every objective should have certain questions, or should have certain, scale items that will lead to measuring that particular objective, or getting, or solving a problem related to that particular objective. So the survey involves 5 distinct steps. The first is design, and at the initial stage we design a survey, we design the process, how exactly we need to go about the survey, like who all would be our respondents, who what would be the, area where we will be going, and how many questions we have to put, right? Because in PhD, if we make a scale as long as 100 questions or 120 questions, that it is going to create a bias, because only 10, 15, 20, 40 questions maximum a person can read. Then afterwards they start, making answers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then building the pattern same way, right? So that either they will mark 3, 3, 3, 3, 3 in case we are using the Likert scale. So in that case, it is very important. Whatever questions you ask in your research, they are important, they are crisp, they are short, they are easy to understand, and they do not have any jargons. So this leads the building foundation of your second step, that is the developing, where we develop the questions, uh, we frame the questions, we get it check, we cross check. Then the very important part is your testing, you know so testing, generally, we go for two types of testing. Please note here, it is important that it's two type of testing. One is your pre-testing, another is the pilot survey, before actually going for collecting the data. Now there's a very thin line of distance difference between both, right? Pre-testing is when we go for face and content validity of a questionnaire, right? What we even we go for Delphi techniques, when suppose we have developed the questions, right? So uh, how to check those questions, whether they are measuring that objective or not, whether they are measuring that construct or not, whether they are measuring that variable or not, that is checked by the validity, right? And reliability, it says that question is reliable. Even if you are using that questionnaire developed by you after 10 years, it is going to give you the consistent results. So Delphi method is one method we go for to, pre-testing. Fine. So once the pre-testing is done, when the pre-testing may we go for face validity and content validity. So once the pre-testing is done, then we go for pilot study. Pilot study is a very short study. It is actually a rehearsal, right? Before going, whenever we have any function in a college, we go for rehearsal, no? So in the same way, pilot study is a rehearsal where we collect the data from, let's say, 40 to 50 respondents, depending upon the sample size. Yes, important is, like in the pilot study, the sample size has to be 10% of the actual data. And then let's say if your sample is 330 350 or 384, then again your this sample for the pilot study should lie between 35 to 40, right? And another rule of thumb is that, for the pilot study, your this thing, the sample should be more than the number of questions which you have developed, right? Let's say if you have developed 40 questions, so your sample for the pilot study should be close to 40, 40 should be between 45 to 50, right? So when then you test and train, then finally you collect the data and analyze the data. Collecting data through various means, through mixed method sampling or whatever measure you want to take, you can. So that is, here you collect the data from through internet, through personal visits. Important is, before collecting the data, the very important step is your pre-testing and pilot testing, right? Suppose if I'm doing a research on the farmers, then I need to, develop my questionnaire in such a way that farmers should be able to understand the language, right? If I'm developing a questionnaire for the consumers, I'm not supposed to use the words like brand equity and brand jargons of, like, brand testing and brand consciousness or whatever. The language has to be very simple and it should be easy to understand. So, the type of the survey which you use for a particular purpose, it depends upon, it depends upon, contacting the potential respondents, like how you contact the respondents, presenting the questions and recording their responses. Nowadays it is through email or Google form, so it's very easy because people just they fill up the form, you have the ready Excel sheet with you which helps you to analyze the responses also. So here the choices are influenced by your research goals and timeline, and whatever the choices you make, that will affect the quality, cost and timeliness of your results. First of all, now what type of questions you want to frame? That the questions which you want to frame, first of all, they depend upon the research goals and timeline. Let's say you want to finish your PhD within 3 years, and accordingly, the best is how many questions, because the question which is very commonly asked by the candidates, ma'am, kitne questions, how many questions should we frame for our PhD? So we just say, like, questions, it shouldn't be too much, बहुत ज्यादा नहीं, it shouldn't be too less, right? it, your PhD shouldn't have, let's say 10 questions, 20 questions, 30 questions, or 40, 50, 60 is the adequate length of a questionnaire which is used, which we consider in our university for PhD purpose. And second is the sensitivity and complexity of the topic. Like, let's say the topic is about the, let's say something, related to the uh, political unrest, or something about, let's say, gender biasness, where generally emotions come out from the people, like, so in that way, again, the language has to be very simple. It should not have any, the question should not have any bias towards a religion or any person, likewise. And then again, the budget and time, that is very important. Budget is very important. Suppose for filling up the questionnaire, okay, Google form is okay one way, but how many times you will go for Google form, right? So at the end of the day, you have to go to in-person visits also, and for cross validation and validation of the questionnaire, we generally go for in-person visits. So here, it's very important that, we take the budget into consideration, and whatever the choices you make, they will affect the quality, cost and timeliness of your results. Now, whenever you have to plan, first of all you have to determine the goal. Then as I'm saying earlier also, you have to describe a population, for example a group of people who will be using your research. And then again, you have to make the comparison between the groups, like those who will be using your service or those who will not using your service. So surveys are a simple way to get feedback from a specific group of people and learn about their needs and wants. So ideally, suppose marketers do conduct surveys because they are the best part. Surveys are the best part which give you feedback from a group of people, and accordingly they can modify their product. So I hope you all understand what is the target population. That is the people who will be filling your questionnaire, right? So and again, it is your biasness, your way, how you want to whom you want to include in your survey, right? So let's say if somebody is conducting a research on the medical terms, then uh, in something like autism, something like cancerous results, something like um, something like spinal injury. Even I have people who come to a university, they say ki we are doing the clinical research in our hospital where I'm measuring the myopia or hypermetropia, eyesight problem related problems, but what should be the sample size, because I want to take an experimental study. So in that case, we always suggest them to go for the census study or survey the entire population, right? So when the people are difficult to locate, then it's better you go for census study or you survey the entire population. However, when the target population is large, let's say I want to conduct a research on the people who are using chatbots, who take the help of chatbots for this thing, for making online shopping. So in that case, the respondents are unknown. I'm not aware of the respondents, how many respondents are there. So in that case, we generally go for sample, or we pick up a small sample and then we conduct a research. But then again, that sample has to be the representative of the entire population. So sampling is another area which requires in very detailed knowledge. So here, if the sampling process is it generally enhances the results of your survey. Then very important is, while designing a survey, developing a timeline. When the survey data is needed, what would the best time to contact the participants, etc. Because see, let's say if you want to conduct a research on the this people who are doing e-learning courses, right? So in that way, you need to visit their campus, and then uh, you should select that time where first of all permission has to be taken, and then secondly the timeline should be selected so that the respondents or your potential people who want to fill up, that they are available. This is not a holiday time, right? So during the session you can always contact them, but yes, adequate this thing informed consent from the universities has to be taken care of. Then, important is what is the timing, how much time is needed to collect the answers to all these questions will help you to develop a realistic timeline, which is very important because ideally, see, it's 3 years ka PhD, and let's say 2 years you will spend on collecting the data. Then when you will be analyzing the data and when you will be, making drafting the results, this will delay the entire process. So best part is when I generally suggest my students, like see, in our university we have this, how we divide these 3 years is, like, we first of all we start with the coursework, 6 months ka coursework. Then after 6 months we have research proposal presentation. Then every 6 months there's a progress presentation. So whole PhD is divided into that. So in PRS1 stage, I always suggest that your pilot study should be finished, right? You develop the questionnaire, do additional literature review, conduct the pre-testing and pilot study, and do the Cronbach alpha results. So that completes the first phase, PRS1. In PRS2, I suggest, like, my students to go for complete data analysis, plus your paper should be in the either under review or it should be communicated to the journal, right? So because in our university we have the condition of two research papers also and two conferences. So in during PRS1 or during the coursework, I suggest them to go for one conference. In PRS2, I suggest them to go for another conference, or your paper has to be communicated by this time. And then PRS3, may by the time that they reach PRS3, the paper is either accepted or it is under review or it is under minor revision. So that this is the way how, and then there is pre-thesis and all that. So this is how we can complete a PhD program in exact 3 years or three and a maximum 3.5 years, right? So timeline is very important. Like, suppose if somebody is taking 2 years for data collection, then how he's going to analyze and then he'll write the report, and that will be very time, you know you'll be it will be lingered on, right? So ideally, timeline, framing the time, and that stick to that timeline, sticking to that timeline is very important for the timely completion of a PhD research. Any questions? Any questions here? Yes. Anyone who wants to ask some questions in between, or shall I proceed?
No, no.
Okay. So the mode you will use, ideally, we suggest to go for the multiple modes. We go for internet survey. We ask them to go for personal survey also, observations also, and telephonic survey also. This is the difference between questionnaire and a survey, right? Meaning, questionnaire says that consists of a set of questions to collect the information, and survey is the method using for collecting the data from a predefined group, because questionnaire is an instrument for data collection, whereas survey comprises of the process of collecting and analyzing the data. Then a questionnaire is fast and cost effective, whereas the survey is much slower and expensive. Use. So the questionnaire is conducted on a large target audience, whereas a survey is distributed or conducted on the respondents. And likewise, the questions, they are, most of the time in questionnaire, we go for close-ended questions, and very rarely when we go for the pilot study or pre-testing, I generally put one question at the end, any suggestions for the improvement of the questionnaire. And otherwise in survey, it is both qualitative as well as quantitative, so it has both types of um, questions, like open-ended and close-ended surveys. So there's a process of developing the questionnaires, because again, good questionnaires take time to develop. They're not just the questions on the page, yes no type answers, no, right? So important is like designing the questionnaire. First of all, first thing which we have to see is the language. The language has to be very simple. The language has to be very simple. It should be easy to understand. Please don't put the jargons, right? And even if you are conducting a research on the medical terms also, and if your respondent is a patient, then he won't be able to understand the language of your questionnaire if you are using putting some jargons, right? So in that case, use very simple language, yes. And if your target audience is like doctors, or if you say your target audience is the educated audience, then you may use certain technical terms. Let's say you want to uh, study the doctors and their perceptions with respect to telehealth interventions, or some with respect to information quality, with respect to, let's say, some problems related to the autism or Down syndrome or something, some problem. So in that case, you may use jargons, but please, when you are responding the sorry when you are when your respondents are the students, or let's say when your respondents are the people who are from the this housewives, or some less elderly people, then use the simple language. Right now, I am conducting one research on the farmers, where we are studying the SCRM practices of the farmers, sustainable crop residue management practices. So in that case, we are just making the questions in we are translating the questions in Hindi as well as in English, as well as in regional language also. And again, if you go for any survey, which is related to the medical science or medical stream, you need to take the informed consent, and then you have to uh, this translate your questionnaire into the regional language also. Then social desirability bias is very important bias. Social desirability, for covering the social desirability bias, we generally assure the respondents that the data which we'll be collecting from your side, that will be that data will be will not be shared with anybody, and the whole purpose would be academic, like that the data will be used for the academic purpose only. Then only we assure him ki fine, now you respond as honest as possible. Ease of recording, yes, it should be easy to record. Coding is something, when you have to give codes in the at the very initial stage, because this is what I suggest my students also. Always codify your questionnaire, because because at the end, it is going to save your time. You put codes 1 2 for male female, and again codes 1 2 3 4 5 for Likert scale, because then you don't have to re assign the numbers, right? And sequencing is question is very important. The sequence is easy questions first and technical questions at the end, right? Biased and leading questions I'll be taking later in this session only. So first of all, develop the purpose. What is the purpose? Then create a conceptual framework. So anybody who would like to answer, what is a conceptual framework? What is the difference between conceptual and theoretical framework? We always say, conceptual framework. What is this? What is the difference between conceptual and theoretical framework? Anyone? Yes, you can unmute yourself and you can answer. Yes. Who would like to answer? What is the difference between conceptual and theoretical framework? Okay. Yes. Okay. See, this is a very important part. What difference between the conceptual and theoretical framework? See, when you pick up any model as such, right? Let's say you pick up the Maslow's need hierarchy model as such with 6 needs or 5 needs, then that is your theoretical framework. When you like see, in technology adoption, we have a TAM model, right? When you pick up the questions like this, that becomes your theoretical model, or theoretical framework. But when the questionnaire is modified as per your context, in context of your research study, then that becomes the conceptual framework. I generally give a very simple example to my students, which I'll share right now also. Suppose, like, let's say your mother is making a tea, right? And she has got a specific recipe of making a tea, like putting the milk and water or whatever, then putting the milk, water, then tea leaves, and some cardamom powder or something, some something like that. So that she has got a specific recipe, right? So in case you pick up that recipe as such, right, like your mother is making, so that is your theoretical framework. But when you alter that recipe of your mother by adding, let's say, some different let's some cinnamon, let's say you want to add some cinnamon, or let's say you want to add some this uh, some leaves, right? Some lemongrass leaves, or let's say some tulsi leaves, basil leaves. That means you have changed the original recipe developed by your mother by adding that black pepper or basil leaves, or let's say cinnamon powder. So that becomes your conceptual framework, right? When you are altering, when you are modifying the framework given by somebody else, that is your conceptual framework. And when when you pick up the framework as such, then that becomes your this thing, theoretical framework. Is that clear? Shall I proceed? Yes. Is that clear? Shall I proceed?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any questions, Rajesh?
No, ma'am.
Any
Thank you.
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, right, we have to create a conceptual framework, and on the basis of that conceptual framework, we need to write the questions and design the questionnaire, right? So, uh, again, first of all, think about what specifically you want to know, why questionnaire is appropriate, and what you want to do with the data, and then this will help you to assist you throughout the questionnaire development process. So, whenever you want to develop a question or create a questionnaire, just list all the questions and areas which come to your mind. Don't be judgmental here, right? So, how many questions, whatever is the number of questions that come to your mind, just keep on writing, right? Then you organize these questions into categories. Let's say, when I developed my questionnaire regarding this online shopping, in the first instance, I made around 187 questions, right? So when I went to my guide, ma'am, this is the question. I said, who will read this? Who will fill this questionnaire? Now you have made the questions. Try to put them in categories and cut short these questions, right? So I removed few categories, and then I merged some questions, removed them questions, and then again, the questionnaire which ended up, it was again around the 70 questions, which was still, people find it difficult to this fill up, right? So in that case, I used to sit with them and used to speak with them, and then I used to get them, ask them to please fill up the questionnaire. Fine. So this is how, okay, we go for questionnaire designing. We list all the questions, all the categories, and keep on adding questions. Then, with multiple rounds of revisions and re-revisions, we go for or organizing these into categories and subcategories. And then there are no hard and fast rules for developing a questionnaire. Only guidelines are there which we need to follow, right? So again, in this stage, whenever you are writing the questionnaire, don't focus on the wording of your questions. Just write questions and don't limit yourself. Then again, uh, the same thing which I have shared, organize questions into different categories. Define these categories, right? Let's say, the construct name is effort expectancy. And then, as if I go for the original scale developed by Venkatesh et al., so it has only three questions, but then that questionnaire has been modified. That questionnaire has been modified into, and we have added five questions. That, let's say, it is easy for me to learn how to deliver online lecture. The language used by students during online class is easy to understand. I can solve problems for students easily while delivering online. It is easy to customize the lectures. It is easy to participate in the discussion during the online class. Because again, the construct or the variable name is effort expectancy, which means that effort expectancy means that how easy it is to imbibe or learn a technology. So here you can see, I'm using very frequently the terms, it is easy for me to learn how to deliver online. The language is easy to understand. So that means all these questions, they are measuring the your effort expectancy part. They are measuring the construct effort expectancy. Now ask yourself if you have enough question to measure a category. Here at all says that there should be minimum three questions, right? And again, you can increase or decrease the number of questions as per your requirement. So but the minimum number of questions, they have to be three, in case of this thing. And this step lasts till the question is complete. Maximum you can have, 10 number of questions. There's no limit, but again, minimum uh, three ka criteria generally we follow. So let's say I'll just take an example. Can you name the seven wonders of the world? Yes. Can you name the seven wonders of the world? It's a very simple questions, right? Whenever I ask this question, people
Taj
start
Mahal,
counting. Hanji.
ma'am. Taj
Yes.
Mahal,
Hanji.
Eiffel Tower.
Hmm.
Uh,
Then.
Next,
You
क्या
can check the
बोलते
internet. No
हैं?
issues. Egypt का
Oh,
वो.
map check.
Yes. Can you name seven wonders of the world? Yes. So, are you able to find seven wonders?
Pyramid, pyramid, Giza
Pyramid,
pyramid,
then.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Great Wall of China,
Okay.
Hanging Garden,
Correct. Okay, sir.
Victoria.
Let's.
Uh, uh,
It's okay. It's okay. Right. So my question was, can you name the seven wonders of the world? So I think we all started, noting down that the seven wonders, but the answer is either you can say yes or no, right? The question is, can you name? We always start listing the seven wonders of the world, and the answer is simple yes or no, right? So the question wording does matter, and it will have the effect on your data when you will collect, right? So wording has to be very simple. There shouldn't be any confusion. The simple answer for this question would be either yes or no, right? And here again we started the listing, and the same thing happens when we frame questions in such a manner that we at times we ask two three things in a one question, so that the people get confused, right? Are you happy and satisfied? Either you can be happy or you can be satisfied, right? So uh, in this case, please make sure that question is correct and it is easy and it is a straightforward question, right? In this case my question was wrong because I would have given the option say yes or no, where everybody would have responded, right? So I just left it open ended, and then that led to confusion among the respondents, right? So the same error which I committed, I think we should avoid in our questionnaires, right? So when it comes to drafting the questionnaire, this step is very challenging because it asks how we ask the questions, right? Question wording and then response format, there are two things. Think about why you're asking a question and if you really need the information. So this is the Bruzo model. First of all, you have to be very brief, you have to be very relevant, and then unambiguous, because again here also ambiguity will lead to confusion. You need to be specific. The example is like, how much have you read about this new sales tax, right? And objective. First of all, your this thing, uh, go by your objectives. Always frame your questions related to your objectives, and we have to stop this practice of 300-page government questionnaire about cutting back on bureaucracy, because we have to make the questionnaire very simple and very easy to understand, right? So there are normally five sections in a questionnaire. This is again important. The first section is the respondent's identification data, such as the name, address, and interview name of the interviewer if it is there. Otherwise, no need to ask. The question would have unique number of purposes. Then there is an introduction and instructions also we give. And again, this is the second is the information and classification data. I would like to share one questionnaire here. Just a moment. Okay. Just I'll share one questionnaire. See, this is how we developed a questionnaire for, let's say, some for pre-testing, right? First of all, this is a informed consent, and then we gave the operational definitions of the variables which we have put. Then there is demographic profile, and then there are the items, because here it is, since we are going for the pre-testing, so what I have done is we have written the questionnaire construct as well as the questions which are related. So total there are 54 questions in this questionnaire. So this is how the format of pre-testing of the questionnaire is there, right? Yes. So a valid questionnaire must have, see, the relevance and complete. As I said, let's say this is the scale of employee engagement. I always tell ki, right, put a item code, right? Let's say there are questions on emotional, there are questions on cognitive, and then there is question on behavioral. So in that case, the item code has to be put. Let's say EMO1, EMO2, because when you will put EMO1, 2, when you will have the responses again, that exercise you won't be able to do it. It will save a lot of your time, because your questionnaire will have around 50 to 60 questions. In that case, when the item code is given earlier, so it becomes very easy for us to identify the numbers of the question as well as the related, which is the question exactly, right? In Excel sheet it becomes very easy, because again, when we go for statistical test in SPSS or MOS, we don't give the whole question, we just give the item code. So that item codes helps you to frame the models, right? Now be simple and short as possible. Ask one question. Like, again I said, are you happy and satisfied with the service? This is we call as a double barreled questions, right? So double barreled questions generally we need to avoid, because again it's because you can be happy, but you cannot be satisfied, or you can be satisfied but you may not be happy, right? So in that way, ask one question at a time. Don't use jargons and negative wording in a questionnaire. Then wording count, respondents do not have the best memories. So be specific and try not to ask about the generalities. Right? General questions you should avoid. Try to be specific. Try to have those questions which are which you can measure, and then again which you can measure, and then again they should correspond to your constructs, right? Be careful while asking the threatening questions. We need to avoid the threatening questions, right? So this is one very simple example. Sir, may I have your 5 minutes of time here? Because people don't have time, people don't give you time exactly, so you have to reach out to them. You have to be very specific and very precise when you want to go for questionnaire testing. So now, again, I was saying avoid double barreled questions. That means each item should consist of one concept or the term. Do I care about my students and their families? Like, see, just read this question. Do I care about my students and their families? There are two concepts. Students is one concept and their family is another concept. So at a time, either I can be careful to my students or to their families, right? So either I can think about the student simultaneously, I can't ask two things, no? So here, either you frame two questions accordingly. That is, first question should be of, do I care about my students, and the second question is, do I care about my families? Then, this is very important, asking leading and loading questions. Loaded questions are written in a way that force respondent to answer that doesn't accurately reflect his or her opinion, right? Let's say this is the key survey mistake. It is one of the key survey mistake where we go for the force thinking, right? Where do you enjoy drinking beer? The respondent is announcing that they drink beer, but how many people dislike beer, or they don't beer, or they don't drink alcohol, and they can't answer the question truthfully, right? What influences your vote in major elections? If I ask this question, most of you say my own opinion. But again, it's never true. We are always influenced by media outlets, family, friends, etc., and video advertising also. Right. So top mistake one we do is question should never be worded in a way that will sway the reader to one side. How short was Napoleon, right? The word short immediately brings the images to the mind of the respondent that, how much short, right? See, short in my terms would be different and in your terms would be different. So there are no two opinions, right? How would you describe Napoleon's height? That would be the better question, right? Then, should concerned parents use infant car seats? Who are the concerned parents here? Everybody's a concerned parent, right? So again, it leads the topic away from the respondent away from the topic. Do you redesigning is, do you think special car seats should be required for infant passengers? This is the better way of writing the question. So इसे questionnaire मेरा हो गया. It's very simple to make. We take the standardized questionnaires, but even then, for standardized question also, you need to modify the questionnaire as per the need of your study or as per your study, right? So question wording, again, uh, the wording has to be taken care of and so that they become more precise. Now, are you satisfied with your job is not sufficiently specific because it doesn't provide the necessary frame of reference. So one may be satisfied from the view of emoluments, or other may be satisfied with the type of the work, or maybe it is because of the environment, work environment, you may be satisfied or dissatisfied. So here again you need to think about, like, uh, how you have to ask the questions, right? Again, I'll say open-ended questions. Generally, we go for open-ended questions in a qualitative study, and open-ended questions, they do pose some problems, and they ask the respondents to ask in their own words. But again, then you have to, uh, you know, uh, again you have to analyze those open-ended questions, which is really a tedious task. But in quantitative survey, you generally bind them into scales, you bind them into Likert scale and all that, and that again leads to what, when we bind them, they are forced to enter the choices within that time frame, and which helps to give you the responses, and it is easy to conduct a quantitative survey, right? Yes, the same thing which I explained it is just now. Structured questionnaires use quantitative data. That is, again, it initiates the formal inquiry, then checks the cumulative data and helps to validate hyper and unstructured. There are two. We see open-ended, close-ended is one type of questionnaire. Then structured and unstructured questionnaires. They are again different types of questionnaires, right? So structured questionnaires generally use quantitative, where we bind the respondents into five. Uh, Point Likert or 7 point Likert scale or 4 point Likert scale, whichever scale we are using. And unstructured questionnaires, they are generally on the qualitative data, where they use a basic structure. And again, the questions are open ended and collect the specific data from the participant. Like few examples are, what names of local banks can you think of? What comes to your mind when you look at this advertisements? What do you buy more of your clothing from, let's say, Meena Bazaar or something, other stores? How would you describe your supervisor's management style? Please tell us about how our stores can perform better, right? So these are all the open-ended questions, and they are to be coded. And then for qualitative research, and Vivo software is there, which helps you to go for the sentiment analysis and all that. Then there are disguised versus undisguised questions. Disguised is when the subject is unaware that he or she is being observed. For example, a mystery shopper. It is important to see that the subject is being watched, because if they know that they are being watched, their behavior automatically changes. And undisguised is when a respondent knows that he or she is being observed. For example, in laboratory settings, right? Or even when we develop some sort of training module, and we give a go for pre and post testing of that training module, that is your undisguised questionnaire. Again, it raises some ethical concerns also, your disguised one, because you are observing a person without taking his consent, right? So again, ideally, we should inform the respondent that yes, he is being observed for a reason. Let's say half thrown experiments which we conducted, that they conducted into the laboratory settings. They are very common experiments, half thrown experiments, which we studied in the very initial stages of our management, this principles and practice of management subject, or OB subject. So they all were conducted under the specific, where they were given the intermittent breaks, and likewise their increased in that performance increased or decreased as per the different settings, right? So these are the open, how we can stop corruption. And then close ended questions, they have definite answers and they are easy to respond. Now, again, open response formats do not limit the responses, but they can create data management issues. For that, always tell ki, right, go for learn the NVivo software and then try to analyze. And again, use open-ended questions strategically, because before asking, specific questions, just do a little bit of homework that whether that is required or not. And how many, provide labels, how many days, right? So dash dal ke, it's wrong way. Rather than you give certain label, you write the label like 5 days, 7 days, or 8 days. So to neutral or to not to neutral, this is again one of the issue, because again when we go for the Likert scale, the third option is neutral or neither agree nor disagree. So nowadays, when people mark all the responses as three, that means they are not responding properly. They're not, giving their opinion properly. In that case, it becomes little bit tedious, right? So to neutral or to not in neutral, nowadays the Likert scales which are coming in the various research papers, they are using 4-point Likert scale, not 5-point Likert scale. Yes. Third one, neither disagree or disagree. So again, when a person is entering three, then means he's neither agreeing to a problem nor disagreeing to a problem. Then how we will make a choice, or how we will categorize? Yes, this is important, this is least important, right? So this leads to some probable error. Uh, Now, pre-coding saves time with data entry. So always try to pre-code. Always try to pre-code. Always give code one to the yes and no to the pre-code. There is more than one way. You can use a variety of question formats. Ideally, we always frame a, when we are in the process of framing a questionnaire, we always put a negative question in between, or let's say, the negative question, or some question with negative, so as to check if fine, the respondent is reading. If he's marking negative question as 5 also, and all the positive questions as 5 also, then means he has not read the question properly, and that may lead to the bias, right? So there are different types of biases also which we speak, because when we have the data with us, we go for different type of initial data quality checks. First of all, when we collect the data, we go for checking the mean and standard deviations, like we check the normality of the data. Then we check for the missing values, and we replace the missing values with uh, the average. And then important is social desirability bias, which we have already seen. Then another is common method bias, which we check when we collect the data. Common method bias is very important bias, because what happened, let's say, took a sample of 300, right? So out of 300, there were, let's say, 200 people who responded in one go, right? And another 100, the set of 100 set of respondents, there were those people who were like who you had to go for repeated requests. Please fill up the form, please fill up the questionnaire. You used to request them a lot, please fill up the questionnaire. So in that case, those people, what happened, like they took time to fill up your form, and as a result of which you need to compare the differences, because They may must have written all the responses 555 or made a pattern like 333. So when you compare the mean and standard deviation, that means there is no difference between the um, responses of the early and late respondents, making that there is non-response bias is not present, not an issue in your this thing. And think about the timing when you are asking, and when are asking the questions, and where they are placed in your questionnaire. So this is again yes, no, unidimensional is not at all too very interested. Then semantic is we put two two opposite words, boring to interesting, right? So the presentation is like this. Create a conversational tone throughout the questionnaire. Begin with the easy questions and first, and more challenging questions later. Limit demographic questions only those who want to ask or those who are required. Let's say, if I'm asking, right, whether you go for telehealth and then telehealth or telemedicine, maybe if I'm measuring the perception of the patient. So I don't need to ask how many kids you have and in which class do they read, right? Because I limit my demographic question ki how many teleconsultations we have already taken in your um, scale. And think about placing the demographic questions at the end if possible. This is one of the questionnaire. Again, important is age in years, where we put age brackets, right? Nowadays, the because in my few of my previous papers, the reviewers were asking like, what is the criteria of age? If you are taking 18 to 30 years, so how do you categorize that? And if we are taking, let's say, millennials, if I'm taking millennials, or if I'm taking centennials, then how I am categorizing those category those into years, right? So in that case, age ka criteria is very 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 important always. And then 24 to 35, then next age criteria has to be 36 to 45. Then education qualifications we need to see, designation we need to check. Then ask about behaviors before, attitude or opinions. Create sections to break up the longer questionnaires. We need to break up into sections or subsections. Use the page space effectively. We need to use the page space effectively. And the design, yes, format has to be very good, or format has to be apt, right? So this is again sections. What I am saying, create sections or subsections. This is how I have broken it into subsections and subsections, right? Work life balance, and then again these are the various subsections. And then relevant questions have been added in particular section. Then margin size, layout, font size makes a big difference. It should be easily readable. Tables are a good tool for helping the format. Let's say, this is the table which I have made. So it's again, it's again trying to segregate different uh, questions. Then third is bullets and symbols. Yes, they can provide. You can provide them into the boxes. And shading can assist the respondent to complete the questionnaire. So that is all about the questionnaire. Uh, yes, in case you want me to, I'll show you one of the, again, one questionnaire I showed, another questionnaire also I can show. Just a moment, just I can show. Just a moment. Yes, this is the one of the questionnaire with my candidate again, where we worked on the electric mobility. Although thesis has been submitted now, so where we try to find the try to analyze the enablers and inhibitors. We make it into sections like, let's say this is the demographic. Then we put a filter question like, do you own a e-vehicle? Because we wanted to measure the perception of those who have e-vehicle, right? So this is again, and then operational definitions again. Because I generally give operational definitions because that is important. And see, you can see the coding I've given in the very initial stage. Even when I make the Google form to, make, these are the codings, right? And again, since this is again for the pre-testing and all that, we need to give the this name of the construct, let's say perceived behavioral control, and the source from where I have taken these items. Like, see, this is how we format or we make the questionnaire. This is how you can always see intention to adopt, hyperbolic discounting. Also, I took financial incentive, and these are the barriers which we studied. These are the right. And then please share any additional information which you feel that has not been captured in the survey, additional information related to enablers, inhibitors, any other information apart from the above. This is how I go for, pre-testing of the questionnaire, right? And when I'll make the final questionnaire, I'll just remove all these and I'll only put these codes ENV 1, 2, 3, and this one. Social impact using this 1, 2, 3, and this one. So this is how I go about designing the questionnaires. Yeah, I think I'll go for stop sharing, and then I would let's have an open house. Any questions? Any questions? Yes. Nikhil, you just Nikhil is there. Nikhil Vyas is there. You can please ask question. Unmute yourself and ask the question.